I think we can go ahead and get started. There's 31 people in the Zoom meeting. First of all, I just wanted to thank everyone for being here tonight, for showing up and listening for a little while. I'm not sure how long this will last. We'll see what kind of discussion we have over the 2080 agreement, the watershed, and so forth. I did want to start with just introductions. I don't think we need to go around the entire Zoom room with introductions, but I wanted to point out at least representatives that are on behalf of the 2080 agreement. So the 2080 agreement has been going on for quite a while, but we're entering kind of a new phase, kind of the restructured phase. So I do want to ask folks to just go around to introduce ourselves as far as representatives for the 2080 agreement. Let's see, I know there's some background noise. I'm going to try and mute whoever maybe is not muted. I don't hear it anymore.
I believe that that's Tim's iPhone. I think that that's probably Mr. Tim Daly.
Tim's iPhone.
He's muted, Eric. It's no longer.
Yeah, sorry about that, Eric. I just muted myself. Apologize for that.
Okay, no worries. So anyway, why don't we start? I'll start with myself. I'm Eric Schmeckel. I'm the Watershed Program Director for the Dubuque Water Conservation District. Like I said, tonight's meeting is really an annual meeting. This isn't a one-time meeting. It's an annual meeting for the Dubuque County representatives, the City of Dubuque representatives, and the Dubuque Water Conservation District representatives to kind of get together and discuss annually progress, improvements, challenges, programs, anything really related to content in the watershed agreement that we have. And like I said, I don't want to think to the supervisors or to city council or to the district commissioners that this is the only time we can get together. If there's obviously myself and the team, some of the new hires will be presenting throughout the year at different boards, but I wanted to make sure that as things progress and as topics come up, I'm certainly happy to have these meetings more than once a year if that needs to be. We're 6 months into, not quite 6 months, almost 6 months, I guess, into the newly structured 2080 agreement. And before I go over, I have a few slides, and before I go over the 2080 agreement and what actually the watershed program is about, let's do some brief introductions, just at least with representatives from the group that is serving. So I'll start with, maybe I'll call out Supervisor McDonough and let the supervisors introduce themselves, and then we can move to the district.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Ann McDonough, a member of the Dubuque County Board of Supervisors, and just really excited. We have a good cross-section, I think, of citizens here. I know the League of Women Voters has sent out a notice, very interested in water quality and what we're doing in our community through this 2080 agreement to make those improvements, to do the measurements, and then to come up with a concrete plan that's going to take us forward in certainly more than the matrix of just clean water, but everything we do here will result, I think, and believe in cleaner water for us all. So appreciate everyone here, and I will hand it off to Supervisor Jay Wickham.
Thank you. Hi, Jay Wickham, Dubuque County Supervisor, originally raised in Epworth and spent most of my time in Dubuque here. And I'd just like to say thank you for everyone for attending, and I look forward to having good results with this group. Harley?
Hi, everyone. Harley Putoff, Supervisor, Dubuque County. Interested in the watershed agreements and obviously water quality. Live in the Durango area, so I'm familiar with the Little Maquoketa watershed and all the areas surrounding there.
Good, thanks. I'll call on a few of the Soil and Water District Commissioners. Mike Freiberger. Mike, why don't we start with you, and then you can introduce some of the district commissioners.
I had a hard time unmuting myself, Eric. I'm Mike Freiberger. I'm one of the Soil and Water District Commissioners. With us on the call is Jeff Smith and Wayne Demmer. And let's see who else is here. Ron Nenboom. And the other district commissioner is Mel Wilkenbush. So welcome. And what I have to say for the district is basically we're the employer of Eric, John, and Zach. So that's our working. So we have to give them guys the direction to where they go with the program. So I'll stop at that, and maybe Jeff, you can introduce, kind of give us a little introduction of yourself, and then pass it on to Wayne and Ron.
Hi, I'm Jeff Schmidt, starting my second term as Butte County Conservation Commissioner. My wife and I have a hog and grain operation farm in the Holy Cross area. Wayne?
Hi, my name is Wayne Demmer. I'm been a commissioner now for 2 years. I farm with my two sons at Epworth. We raise cattle, hogs, and grain. Ron?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm the new guy on the block here, and I'm learning a lot from these gentlemen and the staff, and always been interested in these issues. Served on a couple different things in the county. I grew up on a farm and had farm experience, but I work in conservation biology now, and I appreciate the efforts here. It's been great experience so far.
All right, I think that's it for Soil and Water District Commissioners. Let's see, City of Dubuque. I know Darren popped on here, so Darren, I'll start with you.
Hello, everybody. This is Darren Meering. I'm a civil engineer with the City of Dubuque. I've been working with the city for over 20 years, mainly on water resource issues. So been involved with most, if not all, the city's efforts having to do with stormwater management, having to do with water quality, as well as flooding. And fortunately was around when we started the Upper Catfish Creek Watershed group effort, and how that's blossomed now into this new 2080 agreement. So we're just, city's just really excited to keep the momentum going and to see where this kind of cutting edge, where the differences can be made right on the field, where it happens, at the spot of the, at the location where it matters the most, instead of down at the end of the pipe. So just excited to be a part of it and looking forward to it. Thanks, Eric.
Thanks, Darren. Let's see, I will call on Willie O'Brien.
Hello, everyone. I'm Willie O'Brien. I'm the plant manager for the City of Dubuque Water and Resource Recovery Center. I have been with the city since 2007, with the city and our department since 2007, and I've been the plant manager here since 2016.
Perfect. And I didn't see any council members, City of Dubuque council members on. Maybe they will join. I know some contacts have been made. So if they pop in at some point during the meeting, that would be great. I want to just point out real quick, interim executive director for the Board of Supervisors, Ed Raber, is joining us as well too. Ed has helped out and helped facilitate a lot of the discussion that a lot of the topics, agenda topics that we're talking about today. So I just wanted to say thank you to Ed and for joining us. So we will stop there. We have a couple shorter presentations from some of the new programs. But what I first want to do, and I'm going to I'm going to be hopping around a little bit, making some people co-host while you're presenting. I know Adam Hoffman's our first one, but the first thing I want to do is share my screen to kind of kick us off here on the agreement. I did wanted to, real quick, I did want to just kind of, go over the whole reason for this meeting. Like I said earlier, it's an annual meeting of reviewing the accomplishments in our watershed program in the 2080 agreement. Let me bring this screen up real quick. And one of the first, hopefully everyone can see this. One of the first things I wanted to do, and one of the first big steps of going through the 2080 agreement was hiring additional staff for some of the support work that we've been doing. We've actually been looking, we've had a continued 2080 agreement and watershed work for the last 10 years between the city of Dubuque and Dubuque County, which has employed myself. But this is a new step, and we really took really the last year or so to kind of hash out a lot of the details in the agreement itself. I'm not going to go through it word for word today, but if anyone would like a copy of the 2080 agreement, please email me or get a hold of me. And at the end of my slides, my email and contact information will be shared. So if anyone wants to see that agreement, I'm more than happy to email it off your way, and you can go through the agreement. It's a lengthy agreement. And it really, like I said, it's really a continuation of district, county, and city building a watershed program focused on what you see there: watershed protection, erosion control, and flood prevention. I think what makes this agreement so unique and bringing all the political jurisdictions together is that really we're looking at both agricultural engagement. We have a brand new land stewardship fund, and we're looking at funding more conservation projects. Probably most importantly, developing relationships with farmers in Dubuque County. And then the other half of it would be the urban side of stormwater, of floodplain, of erosion control, and all the different inspections and so forth that go back to drainage and subdivisions and impervious surface and the stormwater world. So as far as I know, we're one of the only counties in the state that has an agreement of this length that kind of dives into both agricultural and stormwater. Hence, Dubuque County is a very urban and rural county, as we all know, and we face a lot of challenges as they relate to, watershed concerns, flooding, water quality, erosion, and so forth. That being said, one of the first things we did was hire 2 new staff members. One of them being a conservation agronomist. As you can imagine, that person is going to be very focused on the relationship building of farmers and conservation projects and moving things along. His name is Zach Tim. Zach, I think I saw you on here. I hope you're on here. Why don't you give a brief introduction to yourself?
Yeah, thanks for that introduction, Eric. So I farm down by Monticello with my parents. We have row crops and cattle. And so I worked at a small seed company prior to this job. So that's where a lot of my experience with the small seeds and conservation comes into play. So, yep.
And Zach is fresh out of Iowa State. So we're happy to have him. I think he's going to do a fantastic job. I know Zach's been going now for what, 5 or 6 weeks, I think. And developing relationships. He's been out meeting with farmers pretty consistently the last few weeks, talking about some of the new programs that we're going to discuss tonight. The other new hire is an urban watershed coordinator. And the reason the district came up with the name urban watershed coordinator versus just stormwater inspector is we feel that this position is going to be kind of a balanced mold of dealing with both stormwater, floodplain, all the permitting issues, but then also understanding the collaboration and the focus between the city and the county and the engagement as it relates to the nutrient reduction exchange, as it relates to the nutrient reduction strategy that the state has, and of course some of the district's goals that they're actually working through right now. So John Wiley is a new hire. And John is fresh into day 10 or 11. I don't know, he hasn't been going too long, but John, I'll turn it over to you, let you introduce yourself.
Oh, thanks, Eric. Yeah, so I'm pretty new, and actually new to the Midwest as well. And just to kind of give you a little history of what my experience or how I got here, my wife, Gina Bell, who I think some of you know, when we were in Portland, she accepted the position as the sustainability coordinator for the city of Dubuque. So we packed our stuff, sold our house, and moved to the great Midwest. That was a couple of years ago. And while I was in Portland, I mostly, my experience centered on my job at Department of Energy, federal, specifically at BPA, and I was in the pollution prevention and abatement group. And in that group, we really focused on maintenance and construction. And so my experience was pretty broad along right-of-ways and roads and within substations of doing hazardous waste cleanups and environmental site assessments and all aspects of the linear construction project as it relates to environmental concerns like endangered species consultation, historic projects or historic property consultations, 404 permits, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of where I came from, and I'm really excited to be part of this new team. And it's been fun so far. It's been good.
Awesome. Thanks, John. And thanks, Zach, for giving everyone kind of a brief introduction. I'm sure you will probably more than likely be seeing them or be hearing from them and myself into the future as we get into some of the programs. It's a 7-year agreement. Like I said, it's kind of a brand new restructured agreement. Very grateful and thankful for the support of the county. There's contributing $230,000 annually to this agreement, and the city's just about half that at $114,000 annually as well too. And then lastly, and really, what we're going to talk about shortly here is the new performance-based conservation program, or really what I believe we're calling the Land Stewardship Fund. The Dubuque County Supervisors for fiscal year 21 funded that at $390,000, and we have broken that funding now into a couple new what I would consider pilot programs, new programs that have not been offered before in Dubuque County. So we're excited to get to work and start implementing conservation out in the ground. That being said, quick recap on that. I am going to stop my screen sharing and I'm going to turn things over to Adam Hoffman. Adam, let's see, I got to make him a co-host. Adam, Professor Hoffman I've been working with Professor Hoffman now for, I think 10 years or 12 years on different related monitoring efforts throughout Dubuque County. So this is another one. Adam received some funding from the Dubuque County Supervisors to look at some more building of the database in Dubuque County and how it relates to water quality monitoring. And we're excited to continue the process and have been talking about what 21 and 22 are going to look like. But going back to the year 2020, Adam, I'll turn things over to you.
Thank you very much, Eric. I'm super excited to be here this evening. The only thing I enjoy more than talking about water is talking about water quality to people who also appreciate water quality. So I'm really jazzed to be here this evening. And I know how much Eric loves introductions, so I prepared a little introduction of my own. A little pictorial one I was working on as everyone else was introducing themselves. So a little bit about my background as it relates to water quality. So I grew up in a rural farming community in south central Minnesota. So always around farming growing up and very interested in water quality. I went to graduate school at UW-Madison. So I did some lake water quality research at 5 spots throughout Wisconsin. I was working a little bit with the Devil's Lake Restoration Project. So there was lots of human health tie in there. And then I had the opportunity to do some work with the Root River in Minnesota. After coming to Dubuque, I came to Dubuque 12 years ago. And then 5 years ago, I was awarded a fellowship. So I spent 9 months in Sweden looking at some water quality in Sweden, doing some lake restoration research. So really interested in all aspects of water quality, but lots how it intersects with human health. Lastly, I've also collaborated with folks at UW-Platteville. So one of my research interests is water quality as it relates to runoff during winter snowmelt events. And Platteville Pioneer Farms has a really fantastic setup to do that. So I've done some research there and found some really interesting stuff related to snowmelt and the important role that can play in water quality. And for those folks who have water quality or water sampled, pardon me, in the winter, you know some of the fun challenges about that, about doing that kind of stuff. But I think it's a really important thing, and some of the data I'm going to show from Dubuque County today will really hammer home that point that winter and year-round monitoring is a really important thing. Before I get too far along, I really want to thank everyone who has helped out on the project that I'm going to share. I'm not going to list everyone there, but I definitely want to call out the first and the last folks. So Eric has been really helpful. Initially just welcoming me to Dubuque, but then just getting me set up and started on water quality stuff. And then the Dubuque County Board of Supervisors funded this project, and they were very gracious in identifying a need and allowing us to help them fill in some cracks. And then also the Dubuque County citizens. I was, over the past 2 years of doing lots of sampling stuff, I was blown away at the amount of people who would approach myself and my students during sampling and excited to hear what we're doing, asking really good questions, and very engaged in the process. So that really surprised me, and I was super excited about that. And we've actually picked up some sampling sites just based on conversations with people. So more thanks. So I'm going to present this data, but this has been collected, analyzed by, I added it up, about 28 different students over the past 2 years have helped out with this project. And a couple of notable ones on the lower left. The second one, Bobby Joe, she started 2 years ago, and she's now at UW-Madison doing environmental engineering with water quality stuff. So certainly not entirely because of this project, but it definitely didn't hurt to get her excited about it, as well as getting that opportunity. So she's continued on with water quality stuff. So I think it's really important to realize that I'm going to be present this, but it's not my work, it's our work. And as I'm going to step through this data, a couple things. I'm going to go way faster than I want to, so please interrupt with questions. But I also want you to think how this data might be useful through your lens, so how it might be useful for you. So here I've just laid out a couple different potential applications and uses for this data. So thinking about best management practices, how this data can help with that. Targeting some watersheds where money might help us, or we might get our most benefit from a smallest amount of money. Other watershed groups, there's really fantastic stuff going on with different watershed groups, so collaboration stuff there. And then certainly just getting some baseline data for this water quality is really important as well. All right, so at the beginning and the end, I'm just going to go to some of the take-home points that I'm going to be sharing and that you're going to see from the data today. So I'm really going to gloss over temperature, dissolved oxygen, and pH. So they were within good water quality ranges for everything. Nitrogen and phosphorus, I'm going to show lots of slides related to that. And at most sites, they were above EPA surface water suggestion, but there's lots of different variation over space and time. So we're going to dive into that a little bit. Rain turned out to be a major driver of phosphorus transport, but a little bit differently than how we might have thought going in. Chlorides range from 0 to some concentrations that are of concern. And then coliform bacteria and E. coli, I'm not going to touch much on that today, but they were present in varying amounts of our water sample. All right, so let's give you a little idea of what we did. So we sampled, the data I'm going to share today was from 29 different sites around Dubuque County. We sampled 4 times at each site, and then at all sites we sampled an extra time in the spring and summer during rain and runoff events. So we have 6 different sampling events that we looked at, and those are the different parameters that we looked at in the lower right-hand side of your screen there. And then the red dots on the left side are the different sampling sites. So again, 29 different sites spread out. And my next slide, I'm going to show why these sites were chosen and the strategic importance of those. We chose those with the help of some folks at City of Dubuque, Soil and Water Conservation District, and Houston Engineering. So on the left, oh, go ahead. Oh, sorry. So on the left there is showing the HUC 12. So a HUC is a hydrologic unit code. So as you get higher up, it breaks our watersheds into smaller sections. So these are sub-watersheds, and these are all 29 that exist in Dubuque County. And we don't have to worry about any of the rankings there, but all the different gray and black lines are showing the different sub-watersheds. So our 29 different sampling sites were at the outlet of every one of those sub-watersheds. So those sub-watersheds drain every drop of water that falls in Dubuque County. So we were collecting the outflow of all those. So we would get a good representative sample of what's going on in those sub-watersheds. And we sampled each of the 29 sites essentially at the same time. So it was a snapshot sampling. So we're getting a way to compare between all those different spots. So we're just going to go quick through temperature, dissolved oxygen, and pH. So here I just, before I show the data, I'm going to tell you for each different parameter why they're important, and then highlight recommendations by EPA, and then just state how our samples related to that. So again, temp, DO, and pH, so they all fell within good range. Next, we're going to move on to nitrogen and phosphorus. So nitrogen and phosphorus can be problematic. So as we're well aware, they make things grow, and that's fantastic for our crops, but less fantastic in aquatic systems, right? So nitrogen and phosphorus in large amounts are just too much of a good thing. So first, we're going to look at nitrogen. And there's 3 different forms that nitrogen can exist in the water. And we're just going to focus on nitrate today. And the natural level of nitrate in surface waters is usually slightly less than 1 milligram per liter. And the EPA suggests to stay below that threshold to avoid nutrient pollution in our water bodies. All right, so now to some data. So on this slide right here, on the bottom, you're going to have all of our different 29 sampling sites. And on our y-axis, the left side from bottom to top, you're going to have the concentration of nitrate. So this is the average concentration during base flow. So we took 4 samplings, spring, summer, winter, fall, at every single one of our outlets, all 29, and then we averaged them for nitrate. And I'm showing 2 different bars here. The 10 milligram per liter amount is the surface water drinking amount that it has to be below. No one is taking surface water from the waters in Dubuque County for drinking, but still important to note those levels. And then the dashed line at the bottom is the 0.1 milligrams per liter level that the EPA suggests staying below. So you can see we're above the 0.1, but well below the 10 for drinking water stuff for average concentrations throughout our entire sampling year. But you can note variations in concentrations, right? You see wide variations in our different sites between our different outlets. And we're going to come back to that variation in the end when we talk about how we can use this to rank and look at prioritizing areas in the watershed that we can do work. The next slide is going to be very similar, only it's not going to be the average like we see here. It's going to be the maximum amount. So during our 4 base flow sampling sessions, it's going to be the largest concentrations that we saw at each and every one of these different sites, these 29 sites. Right, so now if we're just looking at the maximum amount of those sites, we do see that at a fair amount of sites, so about 6 of them, 7, we see approaching that 10 milligram per liter mark for drinking water issues, right? And then they're all again still well above the 0.1, but still we note a large variation, right? So lots of them are down by 2 for their max amount and others are 5 times greater up at 10, right? So we're going to kind of see that theme throughout, that different sub-watersheds are going to have different amounts of everything we're going to look at today: chlorides, phosphorus, and nitrogen. So let's move next to phosphorus. So phosphorus exists in a couple different forms. So it's either dissolved reactive, and the dissolved reactive portion is the part that's just dissolved in the water. And that's readily available to be taken up by aquatic organisms. And total phosphorus is the amount that's both dissolved in the water and bound to the particulates or the soil or sediment in the water. And there's important management implications if the phosphorus is bound to sediments or dissolved, right? If we're trying to keep phosphorus on our fields or out of our water bodies, we have to be aware of what kind is coming into our systems, because that is important in determining what best management practices we should put into place to help that out. So now when we're looking at phosphorus, there's no amount for human health that we have an issue, but for aquatic health and ecosystem health, the EPA suggests for streams and running water samples to be below the 0.1 milligram per liter mark. In most of our instances, we were above that, but not in all of them. But again, we had some wide variation. So we're going to look at the variation between our different spots. All right, so this one is a little bit different plot. We have a bar and whisker plot here. So we have our 4 different groups there, and those groups are the average concentrations for the water leaving all the different outflows during these months, right? So we have a summer sampling one is blue. So that's every sample we took in the summer there. And then I'll discuss what the different bars mean. And then the orange is every sample from the fall, gray is every sample from the winter, and yellow is every sample from the spring. And now when we look at these bar and whisker plots, the X and the line in the middle of the box is the 50th percentile. So half of our samples were below that and half were above that. You can think of that as the average total phosphorus concentration for those specific time frames. And then from the middle part of our box to the top of our box is the 75th percentile. So above that we have 25%, and below that we have 25%. So between our 2 whiskers there, we have a majority of our data there. So this gives you an idea of the spread of the data from the different time frames. And then the y-axis, we have concentration, again in milligrams per liter, and this is of total phosphorus. And that red dashed line there is the value we'd like to stay below 0.1. And you can see the average concentration, the middle of all the boxes, is above 0.1. But you do see some of the whiskers going below that. So we do have some samples that are below that at our different spots. The other really important thing to notice from this graphic is that we have large concentrations of total phosphorus, pardon me, during our winter months, right? And so this winter sampling took place in early March, so it was winter-ish. But we can really see that lots of sampling regimes don't take into consideration winter sampling. But here you can see that if you don't, you're going to miss potential larger concentrations of different nutrients being transported from our different systems. Again, this is surface water quality at our different outlets. So now if we break it apart, so now we're going to look at our specific spots. So the last slide had them all lumped together, and now we're going to look at our 29 different outlets, right? So again, our red dashed line is showing the 0.1 milligram per liter mark. So you can see almost every site is above that. But again, we have a large variation. And note, this is just during base flow. So the next slide we're going to look at is looking at some rain events added in. But the previous slide and this slide are just looking at base flow. So no runoff coming in, no rain is falling into our system. So it's just normal base flow conditions. And you can still see that we have fairly high amounts of total phosphorus. But again, we see large variations between our site. So we can see that some watersheds are contributing more to Mississippi River and other larger streams that we're dumping into, and some are contributing less. So now let's look at spring rain variation. So here are 2 different sampling events. They were sampled a week apart. The blue sample is all 29 sites averaged together during base flow. And the orange sample is all 29 sites averaged together during a rain event, right? So here you can see a large difference in the total concentrations of phosphorus coming into the streams during rain events versus base flow. And again, this shows the importance of sampling during these rain and runoff events. So lots of sampling regimes and systems aren't set up to capture these, but these are, we found, are really important in looking at the transport of nitrogen, phosphorus, and chloride in these systems. So important take home here is the average for base flow here is about 0.15, and the average during a rain event for our entire watershed is a little over 0.5 milligrams per liter. So a big difference. And in fact, all our rain samples had higher concentrations than even the highest base flow sample there. So you can really see there's a large increase in phosphorus transport during rain events. And now if we're looking at base flow and rain together, so now these are the same sites that we looked at. So there's the same 29 sites, and these are a week apart. And that's each site during base flow, and then each site during rain events. And again, and then we have the 0.1 milligram per liter mark noted on the bottom. Again, that's what we're trying to stay below for ecosystem health. And importantly here, one of the take homes from this slide, I think, is just because we have a low or high base flow amount of phosphorus doesn't mean the same is going to happen when we get a rain event, right? So going in, some of the thinking was that if we had high base flow levels of phosphorus, when it rained, they would just go even higher, right? But I think if you look at sample 28, which is site 28 right here, it has a really low amount of phosphorus during base flow, even compared to relative to the sites around it. But during total phosphorus, it contributes a large amount of phosphorus to our system. So I think this is really important when we're looking at how we want to impact our transfer of nitrogen, phosphorus, chlorides in our system is going to act differently during base flow and rain events. So we have to consider best management practices and use ones that are going to help during these different conditions. So we have to be aware of our outflows if we were having larger amounts during rain or base flow and how they're scaling during these rain events. And lastly, I just wanted to briefly talk about dissolved reactive phosphorus. And dissolved reactive phosphorus is the stuff that can be taken up and used right away. And here we see a similar trend to the other ones. We have a little bit more in winter. And here they're all hovering about the 1 milligram per liter mark. So again, that's in that problematic area. All right, let's move to chlorides as well. So chlorides, the important level or number for that is acute toxicity occurs at 860 milligrams per liter for aquatic organisms. So if aquatic organisms are exposed to concentrations at that level, they're going to have effects that are going to impact them right away, death or other stuff like that. We didn't find any samples that came to that extreme concentration. The other level that is noted by the EPA is 230 milligrams per liter, and that's chronic effect. So that's over long term. Organisms exposed to that concentration can have deleterious impacts on them in terms of survivorship and death and stuff like that. So we didn't hit the high marks, and we just had a couple that rose to that chronic amount. So here again are all of our 29 different sampling sites. And I should point out the odd ones are shown here. In between each of the odds are the even sites. So most sites were around 0, so they're not shown up here. And this was the maximum concentration. So the highest amount of chloride at each site during our 4 sampling periods. You can see 2 were above that chronic amount, right? So if that amount stayed high the entire time, we could see impacts to aquatic organisms. And now if we look at the average amount over time, really only one site, the site number 9, was above that. So that means essentially all year round, because we sampled quarterly throughout our system, we're above that amount. So there's certainly impacts to aquatic organisms at that site. So that was important to note. And total suspended solids, there's no current regulation for EPA for surface water, but the less amount you can have, the better. So solids and sediments in aquatic systems can have phosphorus associated with it. It also can really impact fish populations by covering up eggs and impacting gills and stuff like that. So we found that during runoff events, so during storms and snowmelt, large amounts of sediment were moved and much smaller amounts during base flow, which is kind of what we'd assume. And this one is a little easier to see visually, so I just had some graphics here. So on the right side there where the arrows are pointing, you can see 2 different samples. And again, that was from the exact same site sampled a week apart. On the left, it was during a rain event. On the right, it was during base flow. So you can see the big difference in concentrations of sediment in those systems. So the left one had 5,300, or 5,378 milligrams of sediment per liter of water, and the right one had 51. So a really big difference at a specific site just based on rainfall and runoff. And then on the left side there, you can just see those were sampled all at exactly the same dates at different sites. So those are different sites throughout our sampling regime. And you can see there's, again, wide variation in runoff from these subwatersheds and these outlets. So this is really helpful in trying to decide, where can we best, if we want to decrease amount of sediment, this type of information is really helpful in saying we can do the best job if we focus on these specific areas. So again, just summarizing on the take-home points, temp, DO, and pH were all good ranges. Nitrogen and phosphorus were above EPA recommendations for surface water quality. But again, there was lots of variation between those. Rain was a major driver of phosphorus. So we saw, if you recall, the rain sampling had much higher concentrations than the base flow. So if we want to decrease phosphorus transport, we really have to work on those runoff and rain events. Chloride in one site approached that chronic amount for the entire duration of our sampling. And 6 other sites at some time during it, it was that high. And again, I talked about it, but didn't show any stuff with coliform bacteria in some sites was present. So again, some applications or uses for this data. I'm just going to, in my next slide, show one possible application, and it relates to some of the modeling that Houston Engineering did for the city. And I think it nicely shows how this data can be utilized in other ways to help inform and make decisions. So what I'm doing here is I did a composite ranking. So for all 29 HUC-12 watersheds, I ranked them according to total phosphorus, dissolved reactive phosphorus, total suspended solids, nitrates, and chlorides. So what we did is we put all those in and ranked them worst to best, and then added up all those together to get a composite ranking. So these were the top 10 on the right side sub-watersheds. So these are the watersheds where we could these watersheds had the lowest ranking, which means they're the spots we should target. So they had the worst water quality of our 29 different HUC watersheds. And you'll notice some are bolded and italicized, and those are the ones that overlapped with Houston Engineering. So they ranked their top 9, and I ranked my top 9 just on water quality. They were ranking theirs on some other parameters as well. And these are the ones that overlap. So I think it's really important that we can use this data, and here's their assessment, and I've circled the watersheds where overlap with my water quality with their identification. So we can use this kind of data to really target and show where money and best practices can be targeted to make the most impact in terms of water quality issues. So I see the application for this stuff in helping us decide where we can target. And then there's certainly aspects of collaboration and comparison we could do with other fantastic watershed groups and projects going around. So there's lots of good data and lots of good people doing some really fantastic things. So I think getting this baseline data together and getting it in a usable form will really help us collaborate and work with our partners, and we'll see benefits all around. Some of the similarities and differences to our sampling to others. Core parameters, almost everyone is sampling the same exact parameters we are. We've added a couple of them, like total phosphorus and particulate phosphorus, that most others don't look at. We do repeated sampling just like others. We also have some event sampling, which other groups don't do, so I would love to help other folks with that. And then some of the future work. So we plan on continuing the HUC-12 outflow quarterly sampling at the 29 different sub-watersheds in Dubuque. We also want to continue on with special event and snapshot monitoring during runoff events or spill events or snowmelt events to really get a full picture of when most of the nutrients are being moved. And then we also want to work with individual homeowners or producers and try and look at best practices and look at helping them assess what their practices are doing. So doing some pre and post with that, whether it's urban and rural, mixes of both of those two things. So if people are interested in collaborating and saying, hey, is what I'm doing helping, we'd love to get involved with you and partner with you to do some water quality research and show how fantastic best management practices can be. And I'd also like to highlight some of the offshoot programs Board of Supervisors was fantastic providing us funding, and we hoped it would really be a jumpstart to other areas. And just from the visibility of this project, we've started a microplastics project looking at microplastics in surface water in the Mississippi River and in a couple spots throughout the county. So that's been really fun. We were working on the Mississippi River Museum on the Bee Branch Creek restoration sampling. So some of the stormwater that gets funneled into Bee Branch Creek down there, we have some sampling stations there that we've been sampling for the past month and a half. And in collaboration with some freshwater mussels that are being grown by the Mississippi River Museum and Aquarium, we really hope to show how the water quality is impacting those mussels and hope to show that the water quality is good for future aquatic organisms in that spot. And then we've also reached out and been in contact with University of Iowa Center for Health Effects and Environmental Contamination. They're doing a Northeast Iowa well water study, and my students and I are looking forward to collaborating with them and doing some work with that. So I really appreciate all you folks for taking the time to listen to me today, and a special shout out to all those folks that are on the board and Soil and Water Conservation District and supervisors. I really thank you for your support in this project. And if you have any questions, I can take them at the appropriate time, whatever Eric prefers. But you're all more than willing to reach out to me at any time via email. And I look forward to working with you, and always more water sampling, the better. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. I think we have time for a few questions or any comments. Like I said, we're excited to continue the database and grow the database of water quality monitoring in Dubuque. You know, something that we've been talking about, it seems like the last few weeks a lot at commissioner meetings is the term measurable outcomes. You know, when you look at funding, when you look at programs, and we're going to hear from Adam Keel here in just a little bit on the Stormwater Outcome Fund. But when you look at measurable outcomes, I think one of the first big storylines to that, and something that has to be in place, is a database. Is having a database complete, and that takes time and a lot of effort, and it takes a lot of repetition to understand what progress are we actually being made just in the water quality world. So. We're looking forward. I thought the slide that compared some of Houston's data, and I'll talk on that in just a little bit after we hear from some of our new programs that we're looking for conservation projects. But I think the slide where it went back to Houston's data and Professor Hoffman's modeling or monitoring really did a good job of showcasing some of those watersheds and then helping us pinpoint where some more intensive monitoring could take place, and that's kind of on the docket for 21. So any other comments or questions, or otherwise I'll keep moving along here.
Yes, I have a question for Professor Hoffman. Professor, in your phosphorus movement, what do you attribute most of it to? Are you also including, do you think stream bank erosion is a fair part of this?
Oh yeah, that's a really good question. So I think undoubtedly that plays a role in transport. Especially kayak some of the Catfish Creek and stuff, and you can definitely see spots where you notice large amounts of erosion. So I think it can contribute to a variety of different things. And one of the fantastic things about all these different sampling sites is it encompasses urban sites and rural sites and a mix of both. So even as we dig deeper, we can look at even more aspects of land use and stuff like that. So, but I would say erosion or stream bank erosion certainly does play a role.
Okay. So you're sampling, just remind me again, how often was that for?
Oh, sure. Yep. So each of our 29 different sites, we did it spring, summer, winter, and fall. So quarterly. And then in the spring and summer, we also did, that quarterly was during base flow conditions. So no water coming in. So just representing groundwater flow mostly. And then in the spring and summer, we did rain/runoff event sampling. So when we had rain events, I would mobilize the students and we'd head out and the more it was raining, the better. And then we would just go to these exact same spots and then sample again.
Do you think the quarterly sampling is enough?
Oh, that's always, that's a really good question. Yes, I think, I mean, for like even especially chlorides, we saw lots of certainly for base flow conditions, quarterly sampling is enough. Especially for chlorides, we saw very little variation between rain events or our different seasons. So that, yeah, showed there wasn't much of a difference. And even for really the phosphorus stuff, the base flow quarterly, there wasn't a big difference between them, but the real difference was during those runoff events. Yeah, so capturing those are really important. And lots of research has shown that a huge chunk of nitrogen and phosphorus are transported by 2 or 3 really big events during a year. Yeah, so I think we have to, quarterly is good to get kind of what's going on in general, but then also looking at those rain and runoff events are really important to look at. Yeah, some of the big movements of both water as well as sediment, and then everything associated with it.
I think I would challenge you to look at doing some monthly sampling, maybe at a few sites. And the reason I say it is back with Hewitt Creek, when we sampled for 10 years, we did do a monthly, and then we did any rain event above a ½ inch.
Wow.
And you get some pretty good data when you start looking at that, and there will be some surprises that pertain to temperature and the like, and sun and clouds. So I would challenge you to maybe take a couple of sites and do that, and just compare that data also.
Excellent. That's fantastic advice, Jeff. And Eric and I accept your challenge. This is actually what we were just talking about last week, is that's really what we want to do next, is continue with our quarterly sampling at all the sites, so we get a really good long-term database built up. But really this year we want to pinpoint probably 5 different of those sub-watersheds and get in there and really intensively sample those. So we've been debating on amounts, but yeah, I do appreciate that feedback, because that's really where we want to go next. Still continue with the repetitive sampling to get the baseline out there. But I agree with you. I think doing more intensive sampling at specific sites is a really good, use of resources. And if you still have that data, Jeff, that'd be awesome to see. That would be wonderful.
Ask you if you were interested. I'll try to get that to you.
I am more than interested. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, Adam.
Yes.
This is Mike. Question: these samples are done at the outlet of each one of these watersheds?
Yes, correct. At the outlet for every sub-watershed. Yep.
Okay. To reply back to Jeff's question too, is if you do these monthly samples or whatever, when you change the regimes, if you could break them watersheds down to maybe smaller to help pinpoint. And I think when they did Hewitt Creek, I think they had 3 or 4 different sites upstream from the outlet. So that would help as far as, especially the higher ones, that would help break those down too. So it helps establish priority too. And it kind of answered to Jeff's question on the stream bank. DNR says about 50 to 60% of the sediment in a stream comes from stream bank erosion. So when you're seeing that, when you're sampling the outlet of the stream, you're seeing that stream bank coming at that time, because that's part of the function of that stream, is to grab sediment out of the stream bank. So I'll leave it at that. That's kind of, that'd be a really good idea if we could get them, those ones, the problem ones, broken down a little finer to help us out making good decisions.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate that feedback. Yep, I agree with you. Yep, that finer scale would be fantastic. And I've also done some beryllium work on suspended sediments in water stuff, and that can help tease out if it is from buried stuff or recently put in erosion stuff. So yeah, that's something that down the future would be a fun game to play as well, to try and fingerprint where the different sediment is coming from. And yeah, using some isotopic stuff, it's really fun and can give you an idea of where it came from.
Thanks, Adam. We appreciate it. I'd encourage anyone to reach out to Professor Hoffman with any other additional questions or whatnot. so we can, he's a great resource for our community in Dubuque and for this collaboration. We can't thank you enough. And yeah, yes, Jeff and Mike, thanks for those comments. Those are two things that we have been talking about and we do plan on doing as we develop a 2021 monitoring program. So that being said, I wanna keep us kind of on a schedule here. I know these, when I looked at the agenda and there were 5 or 6 things down here, this meeting could go 5 or 6 hours if we spent an hour on each one. And like I said, this is an annual 20D. We're 6 months into it, but there was a lot to cover in the first months and really just a lot of program updates for everyone for the 3 different jurisdictions representing. So I want to kind of keep us moving along here and talk about some of the new programs. I am going to share my screen. All right, so like I had mentioned earlier in the discussion here, this is the first year Dubuque County did allocate land stewardship funding or what you might call project implementation funding. We're going to hear from 2 of our brand new programs that we're starting in Dubuque County that Zach has been meeting with farmers and discussing, talking about. First, I think we'll hear from Adam Keel on a new program called the Soil and Water Outcomes Fund. And it sounds just like it does. The program is focused on looking at nutrient reductions and paying farmers for those reductions and those outcomes. And the second program is a new pilot program, first funded, I think, in the Midwest. We're going to hear from Spencer Herbert from Chutera and hear a little bit about sustainability insight engine and how that works. You guys can see the numbers there on my slide. $150,000 was allocated to the Reharvest Group, which is the outcome fund. $100,000 into Dubuque County Chutera pilot program, and then $150,000 is left in an eco services program, which lots of discussion has been had at with commissioners and with supervisors, and we're going to hear from some of our other friends in Dubuque County here in the next coming weeks at supervisors meetings. But keep us going here. Adam Keel is the Director of Conservation for the Iowa Soybean Association. He's also the co-founder, I believe, of the Reharvest Soil and Water Outcome Fund. Always thankful to get Adam's time, and I'm going to turn it over to him. I'm going to stop. Adam, I think you can just share your screen. I don't think I need to make you co-host.
Nope, I think I can here, so long as we can see that. There we go. Thanks everybody for the time tonight. Really appreciate the partnership that we have with Dubuque County and the residents of Dubuque, and looking forward to doing some really cool things with farmers in Dubuque County this coming year. So I just have 3 slides. So I'll keep it short, but I really want to give folks a high-level understanding of what we're looking to do, starting now, actually, through our partnership with Dubuque County and hopefully with farmers willing to implement conservation in the county and improve water quality. So as Eric mentioned, Soil and Water Outcomes Fund. That's a partnership between Ag Outcomes, which is a subsidiary of the Iowa Soybean Association, which is what I manage, and then Reharvest Partners. Reharvest Partners is our financial partner, and they bring some of the money that allows us to de-risk things for the county. And I'll talk about how we de-risk outcome generation here in a moment when I kind of show how we operate. But really, we transact in the production of water quality outcomes and the associated carbon sequestration benefits that are produced by the same conservation practices. So you hear a lot about carbon these days. We're in the early days of trying to figure out how and if that works. And we're bringing that to Dubuque County, and we have other partners that we're working to secure currently to help extend your dollars by paying for the carbon that's sequestered from farms that we enroll in the county. So it's kind of a a dual purpose program that we're administering. One aspect looking at improving water quality and the other looking at sequestering carbon from a climate standpoint. So I just want to briefly go through kind of how we operate and how we are working with Dubuque County. So for the sake of this, put yourself in the shoes of the Board of Supervisors as a customer of ours. So put yourself over there in the far right. That's how this relationship is working. And I'll kind of walk through now how the Outcomes Fund operates. And then I'll kind of walk through a timeline quick. So the Soil and Water Outcomes Fund, first we enter into partnerships with customers, which is what we have with Dubuque County. So that relationship is secure and we're working in Dubuque County. So at the present time, we're working on recruiting farmers in the county, just getting started. So probably haven't heard too much quite yet, but Zach and a couple of my employees are working on making farmers aware of the opportunity. Work on securing farmers who are willing to add conservation to their farm. And then through that conversation with farmers, we collect data about their current operations and what they're willing to add to their suite of conservation practices in their fields. That typically is a conversation about reducing tillage or adding cover crops or fine-tuning the fertilizer application rate. Some are even adding crops to the rotation, such as maybe a small grain or a third crop of some sort. Things that really have a benefit for water and carbon sequestration are really in our wheelhouse. So we collect kind of that baseline data, as I mentioned, from farmers. Then we also collect information about what they're proposing. So they tell us, currently I'm doing, say, a fall disc and a spring chisel. And they say, well, I'd be willing to go to strip till and add cover crops. We take that information from those farmers and in a pretty quick turnaround, probably less than 2 days, we model what the environmental benefits are of that practice change. So we specifically look at nitrogen and phosphorus improvements, as well as the estimated amount of carbon that we think is able to be sequestered in the soil through those conservation practices that farmers are implementing. That's a modeling exercise, but it looks at long-term weather data and predicts what the average benefits or outcomes would be over time from those changes. And then based on how many of those outcomes farmers produce, we structure a customized payment to fit the outcomes that are generated. So the more outcomes a farmer produces, the higher the payment. Obviously, the inverse would be the same. We do have a minimum threshold that farmers need to meet in terms of payment. So if they don't produce outcomes that are equivalent to $25 of payment per acre, they're not bringing forward enough to warrant participation in our program. But typically to meet that $25 per acre minimum, it's going to be cover crops. And then things that they do above and beyond that are going to bring them up in the payment range. But it's all tied to the outcomes that they produce from the changes. We then go through the crop year and we do a series of sampling on fields. We also visit every field a couple times to ensure that things are going well and visit with the farmer and provide any assistance that might be needed or questions answered. And then we, after the crop year's over and we verified compliance with the terms of the contract that we have with the farmers, we then aggregate all of those outcomes produced from all the farmers participating and transact with our customers. So at the end of the year, we'll work with Dubuque County and sell you all of the nitrogen and phosphorus reductions that have been generated by farmers in Dubuque County. And you, as residents of Dubuque and the Board of Supervisors, only compensate us for what we've accomplished. So you're not paying for the practices per se, you're paying for those verified outcomes that we're able to produce on farms. So if we don't deliver or we don't produce, the outcomes that we've stated in our contract with you, you don't pay us. And we have a not to exceed amount of $150,000. So that's the maximum amount of payment that you'll provide to us. But Should we fall short and not generate the outcomes, there's a reduced payment. Or if we aren't able to accomplish anything, which I hope isn't the case, there'd be no payment. But I'm optimistic that we can get farmers on board, test out this approach to generating environmental outcomes, and do some cool things on farms in Dubuque County. The part that I kind of didn't go into great detail on is the carbon sequestration benefits. Dubuque County is purchasing the water, but we have in the works a complementary customer who's going to purchase all of the carbon that's generated from these same farms. So it kind of extends the dollars that are being invested by the county by allowing us to have a bigger footprint, if you will, and work with more acres. So this is really kind of a test run in Dubuque County. We've been at this for a couple of years, and in other parts of Iowa, we're looking to enroll about 80,000 acres of ground in this program. But really looking forward to testing it out in Dubuque and seeing what we can do. Just really quickly go through some of the highlights. I'll just read the bold text. We'll go through that. So again, this relationship that we have with the county is not, you're not paying for practices, you're really paying for those outcomes. Again, for you, it's nitrogen and phosphorus benefits or outcomes. And through that, we take on the risk of performance. So again, if we don't produce those outcomes, and ultimately farmers don't do the practices that we hope they'll do, there's no risk to the county. We really customize this program to fit our customer needs. So we work with Dubuque County to build something to the right scale that we think is working well or will work well. I mentioned stacking outcomes. So by stacking together carbon payments and the water quality payments, we're able to do more and kind of benefit both of those parties involved. And lastly, this is kind of a key thing and sometimes raises the hackles of some farmers, but we really focus on additionality. So something has to happen on the farm that's above what's currently happening. And if there's not any additional or new conservation being implemented, that's not eligible for these payments for nitrogen and phosphorus. So we're really looking for new or additional conservation on the farm with farmers. And typically how that conversation goes is, farmers might be doing some practices on some acres, and through this, they might be willing to expand to all their acres or add new practices to acres that they already have some conservation occurring on. So through a conversation with farmers, we typically figure out a way to work with them, even if they are, already doing some level of conservation. So that's kind of the program in a nutshell. In addition to the modeling, we do, as I mentioned, the monitoring, and that should be interesting, kind of field scale monitoring of these practices to complement the models. So that will be occurring, and data will be provided back to you all, as well as all the model results, obviously. And looking forward to working with this in Dubuque County and hopefully getting some farmers engaged and generating some outcomes for you. So thanks for the time, and happy to answer any questions you've got.
Thanks, Adam. We're excited as well to get started with the process, and I know the program just kind of kicked off a week ago, I think, for farmers to start signing up in the online database and whatnot. I saw one question in the chat that went away from Representative Chuck Eisenhart about growers committing to maintaining practices in year 2 and beyond, or does that require ongoing payments? You can just chat on that a little bit.
Yeah, great question. Right now, we would love to enter into longer term contracts with farmers, but we don't want to promise something that we can't deliver on. So right now, I would call what we're doing with Dubuque County a pilot of sorts. And if we're able to continue this relationship, I would hope that we could continue those agreements with farmers to maintain those practices. But I don't want to promise a farmer that we could enter into a 10-year contract when we only can really truly pay them for 1 year. We do have a declining payment built into our financial model. So if we're able to continue this over time, there is a declining payment as we feel these practices really kick in from the on-farm benefit standpoint. But to, I guess, directly answer your question, we're working right now on a 1-year contract because this is a pilot. But if we're able to go long-term, we would definitely look to re-enroll those farms or extend in a longer-term contract.
Adam, just a question. One of the last bullet points you had there is they're not able to participate in any other program. Can you expand on that a little?
Right. Yeah, and this is really aimed at some of the other emerging carbon programs that are out there that you might be aware of, especially you, Jeff, like Indigo and Nori. We don't want to encourage double selling of the same environmental outcome. So we definitely don't want to encourage someone to participate in our program and then also sell carbon benefits to Indigo, for example. So we don't encourage that. And also, depending on the ultimate use of the water quality benefits that Dubuque purchases, I wouldn't want to encourage participation in another state program. So I wouldn't want to stack payments together in such a way that would double count or double dip, for example. But we can dive further into that. But that's kind of our philosophy is we think that the payment is, good, and through our contract we're acquiring those outcomes. So if a farmer is selling them to someone else, they're kind of double selling the same commodity, if you will. We don't want to encourage that.
Any other questions for Adam? Otherwise, we will keep moving. Adam, thank you again for your time. We look forward to seeing more of you throughout 2021.
Likewise, thank you.
All right, next up, let's see, is the new program, another new program that we're going to talk about tonight, and that is the Truterra Insight Engine. We have Spencer Herbert here, who I think is probably clicking over to share his screen. And Spencer, I will let you introduce yourself. I don't know your official title, though I should, but I'll let you introduce yourself and talk about the Truterra pilot program, and then we can open this up for a little more discussion after you're done.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. So as he introduced me, my name is Spencer Herbert. I am with Truterra. My title is Senior Sustainability Specialist. For those of you folks not familiar with Truterra, we are one of the businesses within Land O'Lakes Co-op. In a second here, I'll go a little bit more in depth just about who we are and what we do. But want to start off here. Advance my slides. With when Eric and I started talking, this was almost a year ago now, we kind of just talked about, what his goals were for Dubuque County. And that's, doing the things that you see on the screen here, creating healthy watersheds by improving water quality, water resiliency, and mitigate climate impacts. And that's really what Truterra is all about too. It's the overall stewardship and sustainability of a farmer. And that's both through their environmental impacts and also, relating that to the economic side of things as well. Any of these solutions have to be not only good for the environment, but profitable for the farmer. So a little bit more about who Truterra is. We were formerly called Land O'Lakes Sustain. Some of you may have heard us referred to that in the past, but we are officially known as Truterra now. And like I said, we're the ag sustainability business within Land O'Lakes Co-op. And we typically offer our services and technology platform through our ag retailers. We're a federated co-op of ag retailers. And our traditional channel is to offer through those ag retailers. But this is a pilot program where we're going a little bit of a different route. And offering it to not only our ag retailer in Dubuque County, which we've partnered up with in IAS, Innovative Ag Services, but also a more of a service center type model to offer this platform to anybody through the Soil and Water Conservation District. So our Truterra Insights Engine platform that I'll go into a little bit more depth about here down the road, that's our common language of sustainability that everybody can understand, whether you're a farmer, you're working at the SWCD, you are a consumer in the grocery store, you know, you're a food company. What Truterra is doing is we designed this Truterra Insights Engine platform to bridge the gap and form a common language around sustainability that anybody can understand. And so how we're doing that is we're benchmarking and tracking stewardship on a field by field basis by assigning an insight score. And so the insight score is an aggregation of all the stewardship efforts on that specific farm for a grower. So that takes into account everything from their agronomic, you know, their tillage, nutrient management, cover crops, things like that, to the soils of the farm, the slope, proximity to water, and things like that. And we're able to wrap that up into one single insight score. And then we're also tracking some stewardship indicators on a farm by farm basis as well. And those would be your nitrogen use efficiency, sheet and rill erosion, wind erosion, a soil quality trend, and your net greenhouse gas emissions. And the really cool thing is we can simulate changes in management practices and show how that would affect your insight score and those stewardship indicators. And so Eric and I really put our heads to get together and designed a program around the Truterra Insights Engine that would compensate growers for improving their insight score. So we're using our Truterra Insights modeling program to benchmark their practices in 2020 and then model those changes of future practices that they could adopt in 2021, and then compensate them on a scale of $2.50 per point per acre improvement in their Truterra Insight score. And we would cap those contracts at $5,000 per grower, with the goal of reaching at least 20 growers. And so to show you just an example of what this looks like and talk through an example to help everybody wrap their heads around this. This is just a screen grab of our Truterra Insights Engine platform. And it shows you can model a range of different management scenarios and practices that you could implement to improve your management. That's anything from tillage, pest management, cover crops, fertilizer management, and then your traditional structural practices like grass waterways, terraces, and things like that. So just to walk through one example, we'll go through what implementing cover crops on a farm would look like. So our original practice is no cover crops. Our simulated practice would be with cover crops. And we can see our benchmark erosion here, 1.2 tons per acre, and then simulated with the cover crop adopted, there's a significant reduction in your sheet and rill erosion, improved soil quality trend, which basically is a measure of your organic matter, and improved net greenhouse gas emissions as well. And so that practice of implementing cover crops raises your score 16 points overall. And so how the payment would work out would be the 16-point increase times the $250 per acre for a total payment that's reflected there. And Eric, that's really what I had to walk through here today, and happy to take any questions about how the program will work or how our platform works or anything like that.
Perfect. That was a good explanation of Truterra and the other funding program that the Dubuque County Supervisors have funded. I will say the county supervisors will be more involved, I would say, with Truterra than the reharvest program, in the sense that they will actually be approving contract by contract, as I would be bringing grower contracts to the Board of Supervisors on a monthly basis or as needed, I guess, to approve payments, and we'll be looking at the farms as well too. I know Tim Daly, I think Tim maybe is on. Still, Tim has been using Chutera, I think, for a little while. And I know the Telegraph Herald is going to be doing a story on some of these new programs coming out, I believe possibly this weekend, if not early next week. This is one of the ways of how we start to communicate and market and talk about all these new programs that are available to farmers out there and get them going. But before we continue, I want to just pause and see if there's any questions for Spencer. Spencer, again, we're grateful for your time tonight to kind of give us a quick recap.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Any questions at all for Spencer? I will say, Spencer, I was on Twitter this morning checking how much money I made in the GameStop stock market, the last few days, and I did see the tweet from Chutera about they're proud to be one of 15 suppliers that Microsoft has chosen to purchase metric tons of carbon from, which is pretty cool. One of 15 companies in the United States, which is a pretty cool accomplishment. So congratulations on that. Hot off the press.
Yes, thank you. More to come on that.
Good deal. We'll be looking forward to hearing more on that. So thanks again for joining. We will keep things moving along. We're approaching 7 o'clock-ish, and I wanted to try and get through everything within the 2-hour time frame. So I am going to go back and share my screen. Got a few more slides to get through here. All right, so let me do this. So again, $390,000. We went through the reharvest. I heard from Adam. We heard from Spencer on the Chutera. We have $150,000 left sitting with a fiscal year 21 in the Dubuque County Supervisors. We have some different ideas and potential projects that I'll talk about at the end of this presentation. I wanted to talk a little bit, most of the commissioners and of course supervisors are aware of this. I know we have some other folks in the meeting tonight, which is great. I wanted to talk a little bit about the role that Houston Engineering has played in the past, really the last 2 years of work that we've done with Houston. Houston put together a rather robust, comprehensive flood projects modeling study. And right before the pandemic hit, we were slated to have a big informational meeting. All the city councils from all over Dubuque County, the commissioners, landowners. We were hoping for a good turnout to have this at the emergency management building off of Sipel. And of course, the pandemic hit, we had to cancel it. I think it was like a week or two before that. So something that Houston created, and I'm going to pop on here and hopefully this loads up for me, was a story map, ArcGIS story map. And something that's, I think they did a good job in showcasing water in Dubuque County. Of course, we're hearing a lot about some of the monitoring efforts that Professor Hoffman was going over in some brand new programs. But anyone who wants this link, I talked to Jeff Miller at our county GIS department to make this shareable, but it will be posted on a brand new website. I've been talking about this, I think, for over a year. We have a contract with Houston. We're working on the website as I speak. I'll talk about that in a little bit. But anyone who wants any more information on the story map, it does a good job of explaining the background to the modeling project that really Houston looked at. Where are our top 100 practices in Dubuque County that we can install structural components? I know we heard a lot on soil health and projects that are in the field, but really this whole ACPF model, agricultural conservation planning framework model, stems off this pyramid, which is where we're trying to make decisions based on, of course, the foundation of soil health, controlling water within fields, controlling water below fields, and then of course, on top, the buffers and the riparian management. So everything that we're talking about tonight has, you see the word pay for performance and land land stewardship funding, these words go back into this pyramid here of trying to implement and improve soil health, water quality, and of course, sustainability, which we just heard about. So if you go to this site, you can see existing conservation practices in Dubuque County, and then you can go in and identify where our model has suggested, and this is every farm field in Dubuque County has been identified and has been analyzed for where conservation practices could go, such as contour buffer strips, grass waterways, pond structures, and so forth. So they did a good job with the story map. Again, I'm just scrolling through this quickly here to kind of give you guys an idea. And again, this is focusing on, I think we saw this map from Professor Hoffman, assessing our watersheds, ranking our sub-watersheds in Dubuque County, and using this model on top of in-field verification and stream monitoring to determine where we can start investing to make impact. Some of the new pilot programs, again, are brand new, and we don't want to necessarily neglect any farmer in Dubuque County from being eligible to be participating in some of this, going back to that soil health model. But again, to look at return on investment, to look at measurable outcomes, this is the data that we need to build on and grow from. So I did want to talk about that quickly and Houston's work. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it tonight. Again, the focus of this meeting tonight is the 2080 agreement. But I did want to mention, we did enter into an agreement with Houston Engineering via an NRCS grant that we had received, an Iowa Partners for Conservation. And we are building an ArcGIS hub website. More than likely will be called Dubuque County Watersheds.org. And this is a relatively new program. It's a little bit different than your standard kind of informational website, because their website's designed with an initiative behind them that looks at, a lot of different mapping, a lot of different improvement projects, and really does a good job of tracking data. So I'm excited to get this project underway. I actually had a call with Houston yesterday to get the process started, but we're looking at launching ours. Like, again, it will be, these are just examples of the ArcGIS hub website, but this is something that we'll have, that we want to try and do a better job of forecasting this work and educating and informing citizens of Dubuque County, farmers of Dubuque County, of all the things that we've got going on here. So that's something that's kind of coming down. Like I said, right now, we're hopeful for I'm going to say late spring, May of 21 launch for that site. I'm building the panel and the team to kind of start building the ideas of how that website is going to look and what data is all going to be on that. Any questions on those two slides before I continue with the PowerPoint here? Okay, good deal. I am going to, I don't know why that happened. Let's talk a little bit about the Soil and Water Conservation District 2020 calendar year, state cost share funding. You look at a slide like this and you kind of look at yourself of what exactly does this mean? These are different state programs that the Dubuque Soil and Water Conservation District receives money from the state. As you know, the traditional programs, I'll call them programs that have been around, it seems like forever. Maybe the water quality incentive program is a little bit different, but this is applicants, acres, and cost share that has gone out to Dubuque County farmers from the Soil and Water Conservation District via the state funding for, again, 2020. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but I think Mike Freiberger wants to share a little bit of information on what exactly this means. Mike, I'll turn it over to you on this one.
Okay, just a little background on what the Saltwater Conservation District is. The district's been around for 75 years. So what usually happens, we are not a taxing agency. In the past, most of our money has come from state programs. The top programs like where it says cost share all the way down to REAP funding, that comes from the general fund, and that's funded through the Iowa Department of Agriculture and Land Stewardship. And they have a cost share program basically, and they give each district so much money. There's a formula that they do. The REAP funding basically comes from the REAP program. The tree and the shrub establishment, they have two funds in that. So one is for we can do native prairie in one of these programs too. So that money comes from, again, from the REAP program. The Iowa Department of Agriculture gets 20%. The first $1 million goes into watersheds. I think Catfish Creek was one of the watersheds that was funded out of that $1 million, and the programs I worked in the past basically were funded from REAP. The Water Quality Incentive Program that's come from the nutrient reduction strategy. I think last year they put in 20-some million dollars, and what happened there basically is what they do is they ante that up each one of the districts to do practices that have water quality, and I think most of those are cover crops. I think we did some no-tills, but that program basically is to get to work towards the nutrient reduction strategy, and they fund that every year. I think there was $150 million put into that program. So again, that's just a drop in the bucket. When they did the nutrient reduction strategy, they talked about $6 billion, and it's been around for almost 10 years now, and they haven't funded it really to where they need to fund that level. So I'll stop at that. So basically, again, we are not a taxing agency. This money comes directly from the Division of Soil Conservation, and we have to rely on the legislature to appropriate money into each one of these funds so that we can appropriate this out to the farmers. Again, I don't know what else to say about that, but basically we're kind of relying on what the legislature has for money to give us. And in the past, basically, the cost share fund, I think it's $6 or $7 million for the whole state. That's the top programs basically, and that gets allocated out to all the districts. So, so now you can kind of see what this is about.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate that. I wanted to just kind of update everyone. I know it's 6 months into the agreement, but I wanted to update everyone just on what the Soil and Water Conservation District is doing as it relates back to funding coming in to Dubuque County farmers.
Just a quick message on that too is most of those funds are allocated out at 50%. Some of them are just practice wise, they have so many dollars per practice given to the farmer that way. What I mean by 50% cost share, what they're trying to do is they're trying to get the farmer or the landowner to buy that extra 50% so that basically when the practice goes in, it's well maintained.
Yeah, and I wanted to touch on as you know, I use the word relationship building quite a bit as I talk about this is where it all starts, is relationships with farmers. And Zach, I know, spent today with Jeff Pape and hopefully meeting some growers. I know he's been meeting farmers in the first couple of weeks, but it's relationship based. And you know, as we're looking through the lens of a farmer, looking at different programs that exist, some of the new or some old, and then diving into state and or NRCS or federal funding for projects such as a wetland project or a pond project, or there's other funding sources out there, obviously, than just our brand new land stewardship fund. These are brand new innovative programs that we're trying to reach more additional farmers to make significant land use changes and water quality improvements and hopefully focus on that return on investment for them.
Also, Eric, I want to add to that, the cost share dollars that you had up there was just basically what the district administered. Natural Resource Conservation Service has funds through a couple programs basically to also have cost share dollars for the landowners to install stuff.
That's right. So most of us hopefully have heard of the Catfish Creek Watershed Authority Board. They've been a board that's been around since 2012. This board was fortunate enough to be awarded a $1.4 million SRF grant from the city of Dubuque. That money that the city did not have to pay back interest on, and it could be used for a water quality program or project. Out of that 1.4 million, we currently have around $650,000 left. And out of the $650,000 left, we have about $440,000 allocated. So that fund is dwindling down to just about nothing. With in the last 4 years, I want to say it's been around. We've developed a soil quality restoration program for urban landowners. We've also developed an additional cover crop incentive for Catfish Creek producers. And you can kind of see the numbers that have been spent and what we've got left in those programs. Just last week, we had a meeting with that board. They approved roughly $140,000 for a sediment basin looking at severe gully erosion on an agricultural property, and then an urban stormwater detention basin where there was significant gully erosion from existing development on an 8-acre parcel within Catfish Creek just below it. That landowner has applied and has been awarded those funds. So 2 big projects. And of course, the project that's kind of been underway, I would say, for the last year. We're grateful the supervisors and the county conservation board has put funding for the survey and design. RDG Planning and Design is working on a new, I'm calling it a stream corridor restoration, not just a stream bank project, but essentially from Swiss Valley Road to White Top Road, the whole entire length of the coldwater trout stream there is going through a new restoration project. And the Catfish Creek Watershed Authority Board has earmarked $250,000 that's been funding for that project as well too. Like I said, I actually talked to Ryan Peterson, who's the lead on that project with RD&G yesterday. And we're having a meeting in a couple of weeks to kind of see the progress on that. Don't believe it will be built this year. We're talking about time frame, knowing how busy that park is in the summer months. I'm probably looking at a next late fall build on that project, but it will be a significant improvement to that area. So just wanted to touch a base on some other funding sources that are going on that are improving our water quality and some of the outreach goals that we have identified in the 2080. Something that is also relatively new in the last few months, the Soil and Water Conservation District is working on a new soil and water resource conservation plan. This is meant to be a 5-year plan. There's been some input sessions. I know some of the supervisors have been involved with this process from this past November. Representative Eisenhardt has attended some meetings. We've had some very good lengthy discussions about identifying goals and what the goals relate back to, and then getting more specific with those goals. Again, the district commissioners are listed down below. Ron or Mike or Jeff, I know Wayne, you guys are all on. Anything you want to add to this? There wasn't enough. There wasn't enough information, I guess, identified goals to discuss at this meeting tonight. But I'm sure the Soil and Water commissioners, as well as myself, would be happy to share the plan with the supervisors or city council, whomever would like to kind of dive into that plan when it's completed here in the next coming months. But I'll stop there and see if there's any commissioners that want to share any input on that.
Basically, this plan, when we get it established, It's going to be more towards the basic side. It can be changed every year, and I'm thinking that every year we'll probably change so much because of what's happening in the county. And so I guess that's all I can say about it is we're trying to hammer out the points that basically that for the future. And yeah, that's a big goal basically when you're talking about all the resources in Dubuque County, and urban and rural. And so yes, it does take, it's going to be pretty general, but also we can add to a lot of it as we get into the projects that we're looking at.
I guess I just want to add something. I think the biggest thing with this steering, with we're trying to put together, but for the first time I feel as a farmer, we've got with Zach and John and these people follow up, because we can do all this research and we can put all these things together, but typical farmer will collect the data, but then we throw it on our desk and file it in a drawer and it never goes any further. So I am looking forward to what we can prove to ourselves, and hopefully we will learn from that and others can learn from us.
I want to add to that too, Wayne, from what you said. I think the plan that we're putting together is probably going to be more outcome based than it like the old plans in the past. So I think that's something that we really are looking forward to, is having things happen that are more, you know, like in the past, basically, we talked about X number of feet of terraces, and all this stuff was part of that. That was all good, but I think we're looking at more now towards the outcome based. What can we get, you know, the most for our buck, and get as many farmers as we can, or landowners, I'll put it that way, whether urban or rural can, or whether they're government agencies too. I'll leave it at that.
Well, thanks. I know, as this plan progresses, like I said, there's been kind of ongoing discussions and input meetings, and as this plan progresses, I'm happy to share the plan and the finished product at a later date when that is completed. Maybe I'll save that till the end. I had a thought. I'm going to save it till the end. Let's shift gears. Hopefully Willie O'Brien is still with us. I want to talk a little bit. I know most of us, hopefully, in this meeting have heard of the city of Dubuque's efforts as it relates to the nutrient reduction exchange, and kind of this idea of collaborating with Dubuque County and with farmers in the county as it relates to nutrient reduction, and the city of Dubuque's wastewater treatment plant and discharge limits, and what's actually leaving the plant, entering the Mississippi, and technology that could be used to improve and that will be used to improve water quality at the plant level, but then also extending and looking at how we could partner with farmers to get some of these inputs or outcomes, I should say, in reductions met. I don't have, here's the slide I think we've used at a few different city council meetings, and I believe at maybe a supervisors meeting a time or two, and the district commissioners have heard me talk about what the nutrient reduction strategy is. The city of Dubuque was the first city to enter into a memorandum of understanding with the Iowa DNR on this. Cedar Rapids has also signed, I believe possibly Ames. I know they were right there as well too. So I think this is, we're hearing a lot about carbon markets and nutrient markets that exist out there. This is definitely a model that's being replicated in the state, and the city is excited to kind of keep moving this process along. It's been a challenging year, obviously, with the pandemic. They signed the MOU, I believe it was the very end of February when the actual document got signed, and we could continue to move forward. And then, of course, the pandemic hit, and things kind of not went away, but maybe hit pause a little bit with some of the understanding of work that has to get done. But Willie, I'll just leave this slide up for you. I know the city has been going through a feasibility study to kind of understand where things are at the plant and in the county, and I'll turn it over to you to chat about that.
Okay, thanks, Eric. So I wanted to provide just a little update on the history, provide a little history on how we got to where we're at, what we're doing along the way. We'll go back to 2013. That is when the Iowa Nutrient Reduction Strategy was approved by the governor. And that essentially provided the authority to the Department of Natural Resources for them to regulate nutrients through the NPDES permitting program. So the city actually operated on an expired permit from about 2003 until 2013, when DNR finally caught up with their permitting. And that was the first time that nutrient reduction was a part of our permit. And then that contained a language that said, in support of the nutrient reduction strategy, we were to prepare a report evaluating the feasibility and reasonableness of reducing nutrients, nitrogen and phosphorus discharged into surface water. We were required to submit that by October of 2015. The goal was to reduce nitrogen from domestic levels, essentially, down to 10 milligrams per liter of nitrogen and 1 milligram per liter of phosphorus. They were looking at the equivalent of what we call biological nutrient removal. So that could typically be achieved through some plant process changes. Permittees like us with nutrient loads that exceed those domestic levels, because we have a lot of large industries that are food-based, and these foods have a lot of nitrogen and phosphorus in them. Our levels are quite a bit higher. We are going to be required to reduce nitrogen by 66% and phosphorus by 75%. So we completed that study and submitted it to the DNR in 2015. Due to the significant investments that the city had made in the Water and Resource Recovery Center, which was about a $70 million project, and I believe at the time was the largest capital improvement project the city had taken on up to that point. We'd also made significant improvements in the sanitary sewer collection system. So we propose that we implement these improvements over a 15-year period. That way, it wouldn't be such a burden on the ratepayers in our community. Also in 2015, we started working with the Iowa League of Cities that received a USDA NRCS Conservation Innovation Grant to help develop a water quality credit trading program. We, along with Storm Lake, partnered with the Iowa League of Cities as a pilot city to register some improvements that were already being made in the watershed. That registry was developed, and then it was passed over to the DNR for administration. I believe that happened in 2018. In 2016, we took part in a phosphorus recovery pilot project here at the Water and Resource Recovery Center. Because of the way our facility is set up, the traditional biological nutrient removal is probably not feasible for us. We have a high rate system and just doesn't have enough time for the microbes to remove that phosphorus. So we looked at what is called a struvite recovery system that would take our digested sludges, digested solids, use air stripping to raise the pH, then we would add some magnesium chloride, and then have a controlled formation of what we call struvite, or magnesium ammonium phosphate, and that can either be sequestered in the biosolids that can then be land applied, or if it's kept in this reactor longer, we can actually harvest it, and then that can be reused. In 2016, DNR approved our approach that we outlined in that 2015 study. And it was we determined, they approved that it was feasible to meet those nutrient reduction goals. It wasn't really considered reasonable at the time because of the costs and the burden to our ratepayers. In 2017, our permit was amended to require an updated study that's to be submitted by January of 2022. And one of the important things about that amendment is it included language that allows us to look at water quality improvements out in the watershed that we would be able to use toward meeting the reduction goals in our permit. In 2018, I think it was late 2018, early 2019, we really started working with the Sand County Foundation out of Madison on this memorandum of understanding with the Iowa Department of Natural Resources. That was actually approved by the city council in April of this past year. And that allows us to either meet or partially meet the nutrient reduction requirements by working with landowners on implementing water quality improvements in the watershed, and then we can apply those toward our permit. Right now, we are in the midst of the updated study. That kicked off, I believe it was back in August. So that will be submitted by January, this upcoming January. And in addition to looking at our facility and ability to reduce the nutrients here, we'll also be looking at that Houston engineering study and what potential is out in the watershed for the nutrient reduction. So we can implement the best combination of reductions that has the best financial and environmental outcomes for our citizens and the greater community. So that's about all I have for now. So I'd be happy to entertain any questions or turn it back over to you, Eric.
Questions for Willie at all on any of the nutrient reduction stuff? It sounds like they're halfway through the updated feasibility study, and then also kind of aligning, the way I understand it, Willie, is kind of aligning what possibilities exist in Dubuque County working with farmers, and then more importantly, probably trying to get at a dollar amount of what it's actually going to take to complete and look at obtaining those nutrient reduction credits, correct?
Correct. Then I think once we have that information, we'll be able to make the appropriate decisions on where we, where it makes the most sense to spend that money. Because we really believe that if we're able to do it in the watershed, we can receive or see so many more benefits than just implementing those improvements at the facility here. In reality, it'll probably be a combination of the two.
All right, well, hearing no other comments, we will keep things moving. Don't worry, folks. I just have like 2 more slides, I think, maybe 3. One other award. I know we talked a lot on the Houston work and modeling that has gotten done, and a lot of planning progress in the last 18 to 24 months. The Dubuque County was successful in receiving a $600,000 NRCS grant this past December. And we were excited. Mr. Ed Raber really helped pull this together along with Jim Marwadell from FEMA, where we're excited to continue studying the Houston data that when I've talked about the top 100 projects and looking at potentially some large wetland restoration projects, oxbows, ponds, different projects that exist out there that relate specifically to flooding. The $600,000 planning grant will be used to develop a cost benefit analysis that FEMA requires to go after some of those multi-million-dollar grants that we're hopefully targeting. What the next step is developing this cost benefit analysis that basically is going to answer the questions: if we spend $1 million on a wetland complex, for example, in Hewitt Creek, I'll just throw out an example. How much money would that potentially save the city of Dyersville if a 100-year flood comes through that community, or I should say when a 100-year flood comes through that community, and so forth. We're looking at all of northern Dubuque County, what exactly and how far the $600,000 goes. We're unsure, but Ed and myself are scheduled to meet, I think, the 2nd or 3rd week in February, hopefully to go over the workload involved in this planning grant and so forth. So just wanted to give a brief update on that. It's been some time since we revisited, and NRCS has been a little bit slow, but that is kind of the update on that. This is my last slide as when we look again, going back to the 2080 agreement, something that is in the annual meeting. I know we're only 6 months into this, and next year we'll have probably a longer meeting, and hopefully we can all be in person talking about outcomes and progress that's been made from fiscal year or from calendar year 21. But again, looking at what was funded from the Dubuque County Supervisors was $390,000 this past year. We're hopeful that both these projects, they're brand new. We've already had a few minor challenges, but I think things that we'll be able to overcome. And I've also received some feedback from a few different farmers after they went through the Truterra program specifically. So we're looking at already trying to, look at how we can tweak and move things. There still is $150,000 left. There's projects being discussed right now. We're going to hear from our friends on Monday at the Dubuque County Supervisors meeting, talking about a lot of the wetland work that they are doing around the city of Dyersville and improvements that they're making in Hewitt Creek and Bear Creek and some of the things that they have planned. Of course, you just heard me talk about the FEMA flood control projects and that planning process. And again, the ideal scenario is that the benefit cost analysis comes back in our favor and that we can be applying for hopefully multi-million-dollar grants in the northern part, at least, of Dubuque County. I think it's important that we begin linking our soil and water conservation district plan to the funding buckets as progress is being made. We've heard from a lot of different folks tonight on new programs, but now linking that, making the parallels and the connections back to those measurable outcomes, I think are going to be important. And really what I have in bold there is outcomes, monitoring, modeling, and then educating how all of this information is getting out to farmers, but also the general public, is kind of using those four criteria, molding those together into trying to make good, sound decisions, and then also broadcasting that and educating that and informing others of the work that's going on. I think that's what we're looking at doing right now for, I have a budget presentation or budget hearing coming up with the Dubuque County Supervisors. I intend to right now request another $390,000 looking at keeping this thing moving. We're brand new. We're 6 months into the 2080 agreement, but I'm excited about the progress we've made. And it's been a challenging year for everyone, to say the least. But we're getting things off the ground, and I'm excited to, again, I think the most important thing is keep establishing relationships. So it is 7:29. I'm going to stop this. No, I'm not. I'm going to show my contact information if anyone wants to write anything down. Sorry, John and Zach, I failed to put your phone numbers on there. I don't know how that slipped by me, but they're both relatively easy to get a hold of, John and Zach. And again, there is my contact information. Hopefully most have my email if you were invited to this meeting at some level, but I'll leave that up there for a minute. And at this point, like I said, we're 6 months into this 2080 brand new program. This is where the discussion would take place amongst ideally city and county and district commissioners to chat about where we go as we turn the corner in this new agreement. So I'm going to stop there and open it up for discussion.
Eric, first of all, thanks. Very well put together meeting, very informational for everybody, I believe. One of your last slides there when you're talking about education, and I will tell you from experience from our past watershed, you can't lean on that enough. The more you can get to these farmers so they actually understand what they're doing, the more willing they're going to be to make that change. And I think we've seen that all across the state once people become more knowledgeable on what's actually happening in their watershed and why the change they make will affect it and how it will affect it. That's going to be critical. So I spent some time with Zach today, showing him around and meeting some people and introducing them. That's a good start, but I do believe it's going to be important when he goes out there, or any of the agents go out to talk to the farmers directly, that they need to make sure they understand the whole process, somehow size it down so they don't have to spend 2 hours on it, but they also need to understand the importance of it, and why they want to get involved. So I would say, any talks that I gave in other states or around for the watershed stuff, that was one of the biggest things I always said, is you need to educate them. We had people come to the watershed and not be sure, but once they understood it more, they were comfortable and they adapted very quickly. And again, thank you for this evening.
No, thank you, Jeff. Thanks for that feedback. Something I failed to mention that I was going to in the middle of our discussions tonight was another brand new group that I wanted to pay attention to, and that's our new Watershed Working Group in Dubuque County. It's a 9-member board, and the intentions and the thoughtfulness around this group was to have more of a farmer-led group to receive feedback from farmers, as these are brand new programs, new initiatives, funding that's being allocated to them is to receive feedback and to give direction. So Jeff, we're thankful for you to be a part of that. Tim Daly's on that board. Jeff Schmidt is on that board. Marissa Waldo, who is also in the meeting. I wanted to just call out real quick. Marissa and Andrew Waldo are also 2 relatively brand new employees of they're actually contractors working for themselves, but they're coordinating with myself and Zach, meeting and discussing and building farmer relationships. They're working off a NRCS Iowa Partners for Conservation grant, the same funding agency that's looking at designing that website. So but Marissa is on that board. Lily Behringer, who had a great article in the TH what was it, last weekend, I believe, maybe. She's on that board. And then, of course, we have 2 appointed from the city of Dubuque and 2 Soil and Water District commissioners. Marissa and Lily were actually appointed from Dubuque County. Who did I miss? Nick Smith, of course, is on that board as well, too. And I think he's been doing a really good job with some of the different cover crop things. So we're excited. We had our first meeting with 6, maybe 2 weeks ago, but we have our first group meeting of 9 here coming up in the middle part of February. So that's another meeting. And anytime commissioners or supervisors would like to be in on that meeting, I'm happy to post that meeting and make it a public meeting. The more heads that we can get around talking and discussing these things, the better. I'm all for it, and looking at challenges. So thanks for everyone, and thank you, Jeff, for your comments and being part of that board.
Eric, might I just make a kind of a public service announcement too as we wrap up? But on Monday, you will be before the Board of Supervisors in budget meetings. So I know that you mentioned that Monday will be before us with some educational information, but also, so as we look at the budget that we set for the county, citizens are welcome to be there. Those are public meetings, and also citizen feedback. If you like what you're hearing and you think we're headed in a good direction and there's a lot of positive energy, it helps us to know as we kind of lead in the state, and we make good decisions and try to be careful about tax dollars. It helps us to know if people think we're going where we should be going. So any feedback you want to extend to us, I know we'd all would be receptive to your calls and your comments. And of course, Monday is a board meeting to talk about budget beginning at 1 o'clock. Eric, I don't know if you know how you stack up in the lineup, but
yeah, Monday got really full, so actually I got moved to February 8th. But February 8th is going to be, and I'm sure to be talking a lot about what we talked about this evening. But again, yeah, it would be great for anyone to Monday. We will be talking, though, Monday morning, we will be discussing the city of Dyersville. I mentioned that $150,000. They have roughly $4 to $5 million worth of wetland projects around and in the city. And obviously there's collaboration there with some of our priority watersheds. So we are going to dive into that a little bit on Monday. No request or anything coming on Monday, but just kind of an informational meeting quickly with Dyersville and some of our friends over there. But then, yeah, February 8th, I believe. I don't know if a time has been slotted to me yet, but as soon as I know, I'm happy to share that information.
Those
And I see Representative Eisenhart had wrote on here about having this group meeting twice a year. I know the agreement is one time of year, a tough time of year getting policymakers together. I agree, and absolutely, there is no reason why we cannot meet. And if it's twice a year, if it's 3 times a year, whatever feedback I get from supervisors, from commissioners, from city council, I'm happy to pull together and host these meetings. If we can do it, and he's suggesting July, August, maybe we could even meet outside and in person, which would even be better. This was the nice thing about Zoom meetings is that hopefully, I think it is easier for people to hop in and listen to everything that we've got going on right now in watersheds in Dubuque. So. Any other questions or comments? I know that was a lot of information in 2 hours. Like I said, I wanted to try and keep it to 2 hours, but I'll stop there. I think everyone's got my contact info. If there's not any last minute thoughts, thank you again, everyone, for attending tonight. It was recorded. I will try and get the recording over to Tanya so it can be posted for anyone that wants to listen to it in their own time and so forth. And we'll go from there. Thank you, everyone. All right.
Very good meeting.
All right. Thank you.
Good night, everyone. Be well.